Good morning, everybody. My sound good? Okay. I have a cold, so I apologize if I sound a little funny. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Retropay. I guess I should introduce myself first. So Megan Keefe, I'm the Senior Business Analyst and Team Lead for the BAs on the HR side of the Connect Carolina project. So understanding how retroactive pay works in Connect Carolina is probably one of the trickiest transactions we have. So I want to spend a few minutes going through it in detail and really getting you guys to understand how it works and what the system is and is not capable of. So what is Retropay? Retropay occurs when an action that impacts pay is executed in the system after the payroll lockout for the pay period in which it needs to be paid. How does it work? Connect Carolina will pay the retro payout automatically, but if and only if the employee receives a paycheck in the pay period in which the retro pay is effective. If the employee did not receive a paycheck in the pay period in which the retro pay is effective, the system doesn't know to pick it up. So to look at it from a different perspective, retro pay starts with the paycheck in which the retro payment is effective. So when you're entering a transaction, so today is March 25th, so if we enter a transaction today that's effective in February, what you need to be thinking about is, did the employee get a paycheck in that February pay period? And that's really where Retropay starts and what drives whether the system's going to pay it out automatically or whether it needs to be handled manually by the BAs in HR and payroll. As I said, if the employee didn't receive a paycheck in that pay period, Retropay doesn't process the amount and it has to be handled manually. I'm going to walk you through just a couple of examples of when Retropay works automatically and then when Retropay goes wrong. So let's say we have an EPA employee who's hired effective January 1st, 2015 with a monthly salary of $8,000. The EPAR is executed prior to the lockout for January monthly payroll. So in January they get paid as they should, they get their full $8,000. Well, let's say the department says, oh, I meant to put supplemental pay on that hire action, but I forgot to do it. So they're going to go in later and add that supplemental pay on a job change action. They make the effective date of adding the supplemental pay effective 1/1. And the job change EPAR executes in February prior to the February payroll lockout. Since the employee got paid in January, the system will handle everything automatically and the employee will get their full pay for those January, for the supplemental pay that they didn't get because the action was entered late. Everybody following along so far? Okay. So that's an example of when Retropay works as it should, as designed, and everything is happy. So I do want to talk a little bit about when Retropay goes horribly wrong. So this can happen anytime an action that impacts pay is executed in the system after the payroll lockout, for the pay period in which it is effective, and the employee did not receive a check during that pay period. So basically, a late EPAR with no paycheck for the pay period in which the action is effective means that Retropay does not happen automatically. I do want to mention this, an additional complication is that it has to be the paycheck in which the employee is moving to. So example is somebody who's going from SPA to EPA. If you enter that action, that transfer action late in the system, the employee is switching from biweekly payroll to monthly payroll. So that's another example where the system's not necessarily going to handle it automatically if you don't get it in the system on time. We actually had a ticket for one of those earlier this week. So I do want to walk through a couple examples of when Retropay goes wrong, and these are from actual tickets that we've had come in. So we had an EPA employee who was hired effective February 1st into an unpaid job. They were not paid in February on the monthly payroll. The department went in later and added compensation effective February 1st, but the action didn't execute until just prior to the March payroll lockout. So what the system's going to do with that is, when the March payroll runs, the employee is going to get paid for March automatically. That'll work fine, but the system doesn't know to pick up the February pay piece because they did not get a paycheck in the February monthly payroll. Another example, a new hire of an EPA employee effective 1/1 that doesn't execute until February 8th. When the February payroll runs, the employee will receive all of the pay for February, but not for January because, again, they didn't get a check on the January payroll. All the examples we put in are focused on EPA only because we're seeing more of these issues with EPA employees, but they apply to SPA employees as well. So what to do if you can't avoid unprocessed retropay? So that's when you know that you're entering an action that the system's not going to handle the retropay automatically. First thing to do is to create a remedy ticket as soon as you become aware of the issue. These unprocessed retropay payments require manual intervention by both the HR and payroll BAs. They're really time-consuming to fix, so the more heads up you can give us that you have one of these issues, the better. And then I just want to quickly go through the top 5 ways to avoid unprocessed retropay. First is just to common sense, pay attention to the posted deadlines for data entry and for getting your actions in prior to the payroll lockout. Second is get your actions in on time. If we get actions in on time before the deadlines, there are no problems with retropay. Third, pay attention to the effective dates of your actions. So when you're putting an action in, especially if you're putting something in that's backdated in the past, really think about where is this date in the timing of the payroll runs, and is this going to create any issues? 4 is verify the employee's pay on the preliminary payroll in InfoPort, and I know you guys have been doing this because we saw a big increase in tickets this week, so that's really great news because the sooner you can identify these issues for us, the easier it is to get them fixed. And we would much rather deal with them prior to payroll confirm than after payroll is already run. And first and most important is just get those actions in on time. Again, I can't stress this enough. If the actions get in the system on time, there aren't any issues with retropay. So before I turn it over to Adam for tricky transactions, I'm going to have to step out. So I just wanted to ask if you guys have any questions about retropay. I'd be happy to answer those now. That explanation makes sense? Everybody follow along? Okay, great. Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Adam for your first tricky transaction. I wash my hands and didn't touch anything.
All right. How do I get to TRN without doing something bad to the webcast? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So you had a chance to read through the tricky transactions, and the first one is someone who is an SPA employee in a position that's reporting to an EPA non-faculty employee who's in a position, but that's going to change, and they're going to report to a faculty member who is not in a position. So we have someone who has a reports to relationship who is going to move to a supervisor ID relationship. So how do you go about doing that? So it's going to be 2 steps. And you'll see first the supervisor ID lives on the job data form. But if I go in to a job data form right now for Trey McTrain, you can see down here the reports to is filled in because he's reporting to someone in a position, and in his position there's a value in that field and it's controlled by the position, so I can't change it on the job data form. So I got to get rid of this pesky thing here first. So what I'm going to have to do is execute a position action first to clear that out. So I'm going to start a position EPAR for Trey's position. We're going to update it. I'm not going to mess with funding. In his position, so we pull up his position, you can see the reports to here. So just a word about effective dating of this. I know we say on the sheet that this is going to be effective next week. Well, we're going to pretend that next week is March 25th because if I future dated this position action, then I couldn't complete the second part until that date got here, because the position wouldn't have updated yet. So I'm going to make this effective today. And then all I'm going to have to do is just blank out this reports field. Just take the value out of it, and I'm not making any other changes. So we're just going to skip the attributes, and I'm just going to put in my reason code of changing reports to. I'm going to put my initials down here so people know who did it, and submit. Okay. And one other thing to note here is that you will have to wait for the position form to fully execute before you start your job data form. So if it was still going through approvals and you went and started a job data form, it's still pulling the old information because it hasn't executed fully yet. And that's with anything where there's a position action that's going to then impact job data. All right, now it's executed. So I'm ready to go in and do my second part of this, which is to go to Trey's job data form. And you can see, magically, supervisor ID is open now, since there's no value in the position field. So we're going to make this effective today as well. And then I'm going to put Dr. Trainer's Impl ID in here. And that's the only thing we're changing, so we can just skip the other fields. Definitely skip a field with funding on it. And this is one of those that automatically populates. It knows what you changed, so it puts your reason code in for you. So then all I have to do is put my initials in and submit. And once it goes through approvals, I'm done. So, any questions on that one? Yes.
Is it okay to backdate it? As if you forgot to do it or something, can you backdate it and there's no problem?
Yeah, the question is, can you backdate it? And yes, you can backdate it because it'll pick up the current data. So, yeah, the only problem you might run into is if you backdate it so far that you had another action in between, and then you'll have a mid-stack that has to be handled manually, but it can be done. So, yeah. Any other questions on that one?
If we change it on the position, could you have removed the kid and replaced it with the current one that you're putting in there? No?
Because it's a position number, and it picks up who's in that position number.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to take that position number out completely.
And then say that let it change, then go back to the other.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So you always have to do it that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if somebody's changing from a non-position to a non-position, you can just do it with the job data form and just change the employee ID in there. Other questions on that one?
In that case, if you change it on the job, it changes the position.
Well, if they're not in position, yeah. And it'll change it just on his job data, yeah. And if you look up his position, then it would just be blank. So. All right. Questions on that one? All right. We'll move on to the second one now. And I'm just going to do the first part of it here. So this is a person who's in a work-study job, and they also have a second part-time student job in the same department, but they want the person to continue their employment over the summer. But the work-study is going to end on May 5th. So we want to get the person into a non-work-study student job for the summer.
How many of you will have this situation come up this summer? Anyone? What about graduating students? Okay.
If you can.
All right. Here's the scenario on the slide. All right, so what we're going to have to do for this one is we're actually going to have to perform a transfer of this employee. So if you were to go in and just reclassify the position and put a different job code on it, that actually will not update the employee group on the employee. So for that reason, we have to do a hire form where we can update the employee group.
So anytime a situation moves or a person is going to be moving from one employee group to another. So students to SPA temporary, SPA work study to SPA student, like this example, you would want to create a position or find a vacant position and then transfer them instead of updating the position, because it doesn't update all the fields in the person's job data record, and then we have data integrity issues.
So I'm going to go in and create the position. So I'm going to create a new position. I'm not going to do funding. We'll put that on the hire. So I'm going to go ahead and make this effective today, even though this action is not, the hire is not going to be effective until May 6th. Because if you create a position with a future effective date, it gets stuck until that date gets here. It won't actually write through. So you can just go ahead and create it with a current effective date, and then it'll be available for you to work with, even if it's not going to be until down the line. So I'm going to put in my department number. This employee is going to report to Professor Corey Mims, so there's no reports to here. So we are creating an SPA student job. So we're going to do SPA students. And we're going to make this an SPA student assistant. And we're going to do a regular student employee group here. And then I'm just going to leave it at the 10 standard hours and say that's how many hours they're going to be at a 0.25 FTE. But of course you can adjust that if you need to. And there's no other data to do on a student position. It's a new position. So I'm just going to send it through approvals. And then we're going to wait for it to approve, and then we're going to snag our position number here. 2000 2002. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Corey for the rest of it. Thank you. Thanks.
And Adam demoed creating a new position, but if you want, you could always use a vacant SPA student position that you have in your department. Before I start working on the hire EPAR, I wanted to point out a couple of things. So let's say you wanted to find out a little bit more information about Cindy before you started this transfer action. Depending on your access in the system, you have a few different options. For complex users, you have the job data screen, and if Cindy is already in your security, you would be able to pull up her job data records and get additional information on the 2 jobs that she has and any detail about that job and within the department. So this is her work study job. I can also see what her compensation is and any UNC job data information that applies. And I could scroll through using the previous index and list to see information on the various employee records. Another option that complex users have is this multiple jobs summary. And so if an employee is, or student or employee is also in your security, and maybe they have a job in another department as well, you would be able to see their information here across all of their jobs. So this has some helpful information condensed into this little chart on position, job, and compensation. So this is also helpful. For basic and student originators, you'll have the UNC employee information link. And security is not applied here. So you would be able to see high-level data on an individual that is employed or has been employed on campus. So you can see the department, the type of job function, if they're active or inactive, the job code. And it's not showing here, but in production we have added expected job end date. I think we talked about that in the last user group, and that has been added now to this screen. So once the position's been created, I'd recommend going to one of those 3 screens and reviewing information on the individual before you start the transfer, especially to ensure that you're picking the right employee job to transfer the student from into the new job. So which EPARs to use? So Adam's already gone through the hire EPAR, excuse me, the position EPAR. Let me get through all the EPARs and then I'll get to the right one. So he's already done the position EPAR. So now we're going to go and start the hire EPAR. For this particular scenario, when the student is moving from a work study to an SPA student assistant over the summer, a posting or waiver is not required in people admin. Students do not require, UNC students are not required to go through that posting or waiver process. Let's start the hire form. Another helpful piece of information you have when you start the hire is this little I, this additional information here. If you click on it, it also gives you some high-level information about the individual. So you can review that before you start. And here, this one does have the appointment end date or the expected job end date. Just a reminder, when you're about to start a hire EPAR or a termination EPAR, any of those, always make sure that you're selecting the right person. So I'd always recommend searching for someone by their info ID since it's unique, and then confirming using the name, the date of birth, and the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. And in this case, it doesn't matter which job you select to start the transfer on. You'll be able to say which one you're transferring them out of later. Okay, so Cindy's expected job end date is 5/6 because the student work study job will be ending 5/5. So her last day in that job is 5/5, so her expected end date is 5/6. And therefore the effective date of this, so there would not be a break in service, should be 5/6 as well. And job family of SPA. We're going to pick SPA student. And by plugging in the position number, it's going to fill in a lot more data about the position. And expected end date is required for students, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in September 1st. And if Cindy, when she returns in the fall, goes back into an SPA work study job, I can take the one that I'm moving her from, if it's still vacant, and put her back in it. And I can use an effective date prior to 9/1 or up to 9/1 to do that transfer. She's going to report to me for the summer. And because she's an SPA student, again, no posting or waivers required. So I'm going to check that no posting or waiver was required for the action. And the important thing to do here is if you want to transfer her, you need to be sure to select that you're editing the existing job. This is what you'll use to move her from one position into another. If you didn't check the edit existing job box, it would give her another job. So she'd have 3 jobs instead of 2. So I do get a little bit of information here so I can ensure I'm picking the right job. In this case, I know I'm taking her out of her work study. In some cases, departments have a student in 2 or 3 different SPA student jobs, so it might be difficult to tell, which is when the multiple job summary, the UNC employee information, job data pages would be helpful. Going to get a warning that the FTE for this job is under 0.75. I can update the UNC long title or the working title here, and I can check any attributes that may apply. I'm going to go ahead and plug in her rate, hourly rate, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill in the budget information. And in this example, I am going to use 2 combo codes or chart field strings. So usually when you add a row on the funding grid, it repeats what you've added. So you'll have to clear that up because the system does not like you having repeat combo codes. Same with funding grid. And one thing I want to mention here, we've seen this happen recently. While this budget sequence box is open to being edited, please always leave it at 1. When the number changes from 1, if you number it based on the number of rows you have in there, it'll get stuck at the integration broker and we have to send it back just for that one number to be changed. And then you have to get the approvals all over again. So always leave the budget sequence at 1. It is there for a purpose, but we don't use the functionality that it provides. It's there if you want to have all of the budget hit this line first, and then once the $4,000 has been paid out, it would then come and hit this line. But because the way our, as I understand it, the way our budget works here is we want 80% of the biweekly pay to come off of this combo code and then 19% to come off this combo code. That's why they all have to be 1. So they're applied by percent each pay period. Right. You don't go 1 then the next and the next. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. Are there any other questions about this page before we move forward? Or anything I've covered so far? And then it knows that it's a transfer because we selected the edit existing job and we picked a job to transfer her out of. And it already knows that this is an SPA student or temp transfer. So I do have to confirm that an I-9 and background check have been done if applicable. So not all students require a background check. And if there is no break in service, then a new I-9 does not need to be done. So this is really, you're just confirming that the I-9 and the background check, if applicable, have been or will be done. And then I'll submit the form. And does the help desk need to be notified in this situation? They wouldn't be unless you wanted to have the primary and secondary jobs switched. That would be the only reason in this particular case you'd want to submit a help ticket. Yeah. Yes. So the question is she keeping the secondary job? In this case, in this scenario, we had her keep her secondary job. If she needed to come off of the secondary job, so let's say that was in a different area of the department reporting to a different supervisor working on a separate project, then a change in employment status form to terminate her would need to be submitted, so she would just have the one job. Does that answer your question?
In what order would you do it?
In this particular case, you could do it in any order. I might do the transfer first because want to make sure that she's continuing, or especially if you're changing pay. I'd do the transfer first so that goes into effect and then do the termination, especially with an SPA because they'd only get paid on the hours that they log. I think you could do the termination second.
You have to wait for the person to execute.
No. In this case, because it's being done on different employee records, you wouldn't have to wait for one to execute before you do the other one. You could start one and then as soon as you submit it, start the next one.
Kat, when you have 3 jobs, is there something wrong if you just created a 3rd job instead of tracking?
If you created the 3rd job,
created a 3rd job, but
if you gave her another secondary job instead of transferring on the work study, then the work study job would still show as active, and I don't know that the work study office would want you to have an active work study over the summer.
So it won't automatically terminate?
It will not automatically. Oh, well, yes, it would based on the expected end date because we do automatically term. But that would keep you from having several employee records and more to look through in the event you wanted to return them or rehire them in the fall. But yes, that is possible. She would then have, her primary job would have gone away.
when the auto term comes in, because the work study was her primary job. Right. Mm-hmm.
So this example was a simple seat action.
What?
Is this a simple instead of a complex seat action? Is with a simple seat?
Yes. So this is a student originators can do this as well as complex originators. Yes.
But they don't have the access to view all the job data they would necessarily need to do this action?
So they would have access to the UNC employee information page. They'd have access to the little eye, the blue eye, to give some high-level details, and then they could get information from InfoPort as well.
Information in InfoPort, but only if that person is already in your department, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So if the person was not in your department, I'd recommend reaching out to either someone in your area that has the complex user role, or reaching out to the department before transferring a student out of somebody else's department into yours. So graduating students. If you want to continue to employ a student who's currently working in your department after they graduate, this is going to work in some ways the same. There's just a few other little things you need to do, and that is you would want to submit a waiver in People Admin. There's a waiver reason for a student continuing to work after graduation, and then you would create, our office would create the position for you, and then you could transfer the student from their student role into the SPA temporary role, and you'll have the vacancy ID to plug in the hire form. But that does require a waiver. It also requires a background check. It does not require an I-9 if there's no break-in service. And just so you all know, we're in a different system, so we're hoping to look at how students are, or we expect that we will be able to handle students differently over the summer than we've had to handle them in the legacy system. And we're working on some documentation that we'll get out in April to help guide you through the various scenarios of a student taking one summer class, or maybe they're enrolled in the spring and enrolled in the fall but not taking summer classes, or they're graduating. So we've got some documentation we'll get out there for you. The part that I'm working on is SPA, but so I know that there needs to be some information put together on EPA short work break, as well as probably the summer, the students that teach summer classes. So we can definitely, can someone jot that down so we can double check to see if we can get information out about that? So, okay. You're welcome. Yes?
What if the student that was planning to teach in the summer and then graduated with their graduate degree in May? They're no longer, that wouldn't be a student anymore, would it?
No, it would probably be, Mike, would that be just a faculty appointment?
That's give them some sort of faculty appointment to teach that class.
So the question was, what if it's a graduating student who's going to teach over the summer? Would that be considered a student action or not? And they would need to be hired in some type of faculty appointment.
Which brings us to the next phase, Mike.
And then we'll just drive.
Okay, is it thing on?
Yes, I think so.
The blinking red light, it makes me nervous. It's like you're counting down to something. Get my glasses so I can see. Yeah. Did she give you a fund source? Okay. So in our third scenario, and again, this is one, to Megan's point at the beginning of the presentation, we're pulling a lot of these from what's being reported through the help desk.
And of course, the ones that hurt most are the ones that involve employees. And of course, them not getting paid and not getting paid on time, not getting paid correctly those are the conversations we dread the most, if you're like me. So in the third example, we've got for a Dr. Michael Trainingham, currently a postdoc research fellow in nutritional science. And maybe he's coming up on his 5-year term max. And so he's applied for and been accepted for a permanent research assistant professor job effective April 1st. But he'll become a permanent employee and get permanent benefits and start having retirement taken out. But the department said, you got a pretty good salary as a postdoc. We're going to keep you at your $50,000 salary. And he's still working on the same project, so his funding sources aren't going to change. So we have to think of a few things. When you're in processing this action, animation going on, it's right up there with the blinking red light. When we're processing this action, if we know the funding source is not going to change, what's some information we'll need to do the action? We'll need to know what sources they're paid from, right? Because we're going to use the hire form. We're going to transfer them, and we do transfers through the hire form. So Corey's brought up the hire form here, and she's put in her looking for Dr. Trainingham. Got in our April 1st effective date. He's same job family, but it's going to be a different simple group. He's going to be in the faculty group now. Same department. He's going to get a new job code. Have to give him an expected job end date. We'll give him a 1-year appointment. He'll be full time.
He's going to report to you too.
Power went straight to her head. And he recruited for this, so we're going to put the vacancy ID in here. Now, this next box, which causes us so much havoc sometimes, non-compensation job. Do we want to check that box? His salary is still going to be $50,000 a year. His funding source is still going to be the same project. He's not going to work on any different project. Do you want to check this box so you can skip the funding page? Why don't we want to skip the box? Because, right, on the hire form, it's not like the job change form. On the hire form, if you check this box, you're going to put them into a no-pay situation. And come payday, you're going to find that out. So let's not click this box. Even though we're doing the same salary and same funding sources, we have to go in and tell the system that information again. So we'll take him out of his postdoc research associate job to check the box there.
And just a reminder, this checkbox here has been removed in production. And so if any kind of transfer or adding a new job does result in a change to the primary or secondary, so you need to change what's currently primary to secondary and vice versa, submit a help ticket.
We come here, his primary job, he'll be on 12 months. Tenure status for fixed term, be not applicable. It's going to be in the same department, so we just enter that department number again, 800-140. Now I have to come back in and give him his annual salary, same as it was, and come back in and give him funding source. That's fine. Yeah. Same project. We changed the combo code because he's on a permanent status now. So, and then we would submit it. So the main point is, and most of you were aware of this, if salary stays the same, project stays the same, you still have to go in on the hire form and tell the system that information again. Do not click the non-comp job box or they will not get paid. All right.
And I think I mentioned this in the last meeting as well, but if you do get to the compensation page in any EPAR and you have to go back for any reason, there's a new error message that will pop up that says, are you sure? Because if you click the previous button,
you will zero out the compensation. So make sure if you do need to go back that you come back through the comp page again and add that compensation back. Or if you don't want to take any chances, just start the form over again or put it on hold and come back in. Questions about anything we've covered or anything you want us to talk about? We have about 10 minutes left, a little less than 10 minutes. Okay. Well, thank you all so very much for coming out, and we'll stick around if you have any questions for us. And again, please provide us any tricky transactions you'd like for us to cover in the future, or any questions you might have that we can answer.
You can just drop them on the back table. I'll make sure to collect them at the end.
Thanks so much.